Okay. So, hey guys. So, we're back for another episode of How Did You Arrive There? Right? With me and Lucinda.
Hi, Narita.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, today we're going to talk about like roots being important. And I know in one of our previous videos we talked about roots, and it was more of like family roots, like where we came from, literally where we came from and why that's important. Do you remember that?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Are you doing okay, Lucinda? I don't know if I want to do this. It feels like a
No, I'm good. I'm really good. I
okay,
just roots is cool. Let's talk about roots.
okay,
Okay. And so I'm what I'm doing is here's what happens. When we meet, I have time to pull the energy in so it's soft and nice. And now I'm hurrying to pull the energy in. That's all.
okay,
And so I have to concentrate on what I'm doing. So
okay,
it's not as interactive as I would like for it to be, but that's just
okay,
how it is at the moment. Okay?
okay. That's
Okay.
okay. Yeah,
Right.
that's totally
So
okay.
that's why it's important we meet first. That's why.
Yeah, yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
'cause, like, it makes me comfortable, it lets me pull in the energy, lets me do, like, a lot of different things. So,
Okay,
yeah. So we were talking about roots. No, I didn't recall the conversation, but don't front me off like that again, that's not fair. I
the
wouldn't
what?
do it to you. Don't front
Okay,
me off like that, I wouldn't front you off like that. So
okay.
we were talking about roots, and we were talking about how comfortable it was or
Yeah.
important. I don't really
Really,
have any
I really
roots.
didn't mean to do
I
it.
don't really have any roots, so that's why I was so confused by
Okay,
us talking about how important roots are. So I don't know how to come with that, but I'm
okay.
good. We'll
Yeah,
see, like, what it brings up because, like, you feel roots are important, and we're gonna talk about that today, so that sounds good.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So
Yeah.
what do you mean by roots?
So I was thinking about like our family roots, right? Like what family we were placed to in our lifetime. And I'm
Mm,
saying that too because I was given up as a kid, so I think I have like two sets of roots. So for me, it's like, oh yeah, like the roots of where I came from, offspring, like mean something, as well as like the family who raised me as well. So it's like, oh yeah, like how much of that adds to our life or takes away, or how much of that adds to the stories of our lives.
okay.
Me, yeah. So for me, it's like, when I was a kid, it's like I didn't know that I was adopted. I didn't know that I had a whole other separate part of my family. So for me, it was always like, oh, like the family who raised me. And if I look back, it's very much like this Catholic upbringing, roots of, doing what's right in terms of God and this higher power. And the it also feels kind of like this like straight,
Spiritual roots. You're
yeah.
talking about spiritual roots. You're not talking about okay, see? Like, I could not conceptualize what you were talking about because, like, what, I'm gonna talk about, like, the Caucasian aspect of where I come from? I could do
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
But, like, no, you're talking about, like, how you grew up in the spiritual environment that you're in? Is
No,
that what
it
you
was
mean?
gonna be very broad. It was gonna be
Okay.
like, yeah, like, there's that, right? Like, and then knowing that, my other family came into the picture, it's like, oh,
Mhm.
there's like a
Well,
whole
before that, what was that like for you? Before you even found out, what was that like for you? What was your life like?
I think you know what? I don't think I knew what pain was. So,
Ooh.
I don't think I knew what
Wow.
pain
Oh,
or
God.
suffering was. Yeah.
Okay, so I can it's relatable to me because I didn't know what pain was until my mom died. I didn't understand, and I
Mm.
couldn't even when I experienced the pain, I
Uh-huh.
couldn't I couldn't conceptualize it at that age. So how
Okay.
old were you when they decided to tell you?
Well, you know
Or
what?
how
It's actually
better
they
go
didn't
ahead.
tell me. It was actually like another cousin, and we were the same age in 5th grade. And he decided to tell me out of spite, or his mom told him to tell me at school. So it wasn't a, "Hey, we're gonna sit down and talk about, like, the truth of your upbringing." It was very much, "Hey, mom and dad, like, my cousin at school said this today," because we went to school together for a little bit, and my mom was like, "Sit down, like, when your dad gets home, we'll talk about it." In my fucking world, what's so crazy? I was deep cleaning my closet the other day, and I found this paper that I wrote about being a kid and feeling like my world crashed down in that moment. Like, everything that I knew felt like it just collapsed for a moment in time.
Wow.
Yeah, Yeah, and even then, like, my friend Adrienne and I were just talking about it too, where I was like, "Oh, like, I thought if my mom's not my mom, it's okay because she's a bitch." And I was like, "But my dad will be my dad, like, I'm a daddy's girl." But then
Okay.
that alone says a lot as a kid.
Yeah, yeah, it
It kinda
does.
just dawned on me.
Okay, so you were talking about how your upbringing was Catholic, right? And that was before you found out, right? And
Yeah.
then what else? Like, how were you raised? Like, if we're
It
talking about roots, are we talking about your ethnicity and like color and like how you were raised in that way? Or like what are the foundational principles you
like,
were given? Or
yeah, like, values or beliefs. Yeah, 'cause, when we're younger, it seems like we're placed with certain beliefs or values, or they teach adults or parents or caregivers, whatever, they teach certain aspects of what's okay and what's not okay, or certain beliefs. And I feel like as you get older, like, you start to question, like, "Well, is that actually real?" Or, like, "Is that actually okay?" Like, my partner and I talk about this too all the time, where some of the stuff that he grew up thinking was okay was actually not okay. And it's like, "Oh, yeah, like, why was that okay, like, you growing up when it's actually not okay?" So it's just interesting to talk about, like, those kind of roots, and then as we get older, we challenge them or we reflect, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, that doesn't resonate with my adult self."
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So part of it is this, right? Is that we're evolutionary creatures. So what
yeah,
was acceptable at one time and no longer acceptable now changes with the way people interact with one another and how what their willingness is, right?
yeah,
And and yeah, what their willingness is. And that's really what it comes down to. There's like so much like you could look at like any of the civilizations being started and like any of the history, whatever propaganda you've
uh,
been fed, right? Okay,
yeah,
any of the history tells you that there was war. No matter where, there was
yeah,
war. Okay, there
yeah,
was lack, there was lack, and people were warring because there was lack. Okay,
mhm,
that tells me that we have been at this a long time, right? And
yeah,
because you'll develop reasons to attack another people. You'll
yeah,
develop reasons to attack another people. And usually it comes from lack. You're not feeling something, you're not experiencing something. So now compare this insight to how maybe a king is feeling in regard to saving his people and providing for them, right? So
okay,
now that mentality is different. However, it transfers. It transfers because now everyone's going to have a certain concept with regard to that. And because killing, it doesn't feel natural.
yeah,
Killing doesn't feel natural. Okay. So we're going to put lenses in front of it to make it okay. All right. It's either me or them, or it's blah blah blah. Okay,
yeah,
great.
you create
All
separation, right? Like, you
exactly.
you
So we're
separation.
through this evolution and civilization of the world, right?
Uh-huh,
Really what it is it's just us growing into more, growing into more, growing into more, growing into more, depending on where your beliefs are, right? This round, I turned out, I just happened to be white. Okay. I'm
yeah,
very Caucasian. I have a very Caucasian background. My grandma was born in Cuba. She's Spanish. She's passed. My mom was born in Puerto Rico. She's passed. My dad was born in Texas. So
okay,
according to their side, I would be first generation, which is
okay,
that
yeah,
for me is like that's a little crazy because I wasn't raised that way, but my dad's from the United States, so that negates that. So there you go. I have like that duality right there.
okay,
So when I was born, it was like in the 60s, and that
yeah,
is way different. That's like not too far away from the 50s. So there was a lot of mindset that needed to change, like a shit ton of mindset that needed to change. And that's what we're still doing. So
yeah,
being in comparison to then versus now and
mhm,
being diminishing does not serve your purpose. It just doesn't, right?
okay,
What it does is it'll go ahead and it will negate what happened and you won't remember it that way. You'll soften it to the point that it will repeat itself. And you don't want to do that. And you don't want to keep it as harsh as, the charge is. So you want to let go of the charge.
Yeah.
So this round I'm white. So because I'm white and I'm conscious, at least this is like the the conversation, the spiritual conversation that's going on, right? The one that I'm in, because there's so many,
Yeah.
right? So for me, this one is like, if I, because like if I believe in past lives, I
Yeah.
believe in past lives, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that during those past lives, I have been other ethnicities and had other. I've been male, female, a lot of different things, and this is just all of the readings and all of the different experiences that I've had, where I've done like a lot of backstory for myself so that I could figure myself out and understand. Now I'm
Okay.
in a metaphysical space. When I'm in a metaphysical space, that's going to put me in a spiritual, philosophical aspect. And then I'm going to look at energy, and that's how it's going to work. So for me, because I came into that awareness where I could tell the difference between right and wrong in the new paradigm. Do you
Okay.
understand? It's a
Yeah.
new paradigm. Okay.
Yeah.
I can understand that there's disparity from the old paradigm to the new paradigm. What I'm
Yeah.
going to do, right? What I'm going to do as a person, just as a human, I'm going to do my best to eliminate that disparity from this point to this point in any way I can. So
Okay.
most likely when you come across older people, they're going to be like, what? That's how it is? That's what's going
Yeah.
on? And it's because they're stuck back here, right? So in order for change to happen, you have to recognize that you're pulling forward a shit ton of understanding. And
Mm.
all this happened when they were told the propaganda in the way that it was. Now we have like now we have a hard edge to where we have so much misinformation that
Yeah.
we're being forced to understand our internal person. That's our new paradigm. So now
Okay.
in that new paradigm, people who are willing are going to stand in front of that and make those changes. All
Okay.
right. And so
Okay.
that's what we're doing. So when you talk about roots, right, your roots are super important. They're important because when you come into this context, you're going to stand in front of it and you're going to do that healing for your ancestors. Whoever your ancestors are in that moment, your ancestors are humans.
Yeah.
That's what they are. They're spirit.
Yeah.
You're going and you're standing in front of spirit and all its meaning for you,
Yeah.
and you're saying, okay, I'm willing to do this healing to change this vibe that I'm
Mhm.
experiencing. I would like it better for the next generation. I would like it better because I can see that love is the answer. And those are the things that are happening right now. So when we talk about roots, where does that come from? It doesn't come from, it comes from a very barbaric place, right?
Mhm.
In my mind. All right. Like even going back just to the 400s, right? To the
Yeah.
400s when there was like that big eclipse and it blacked out the world for a while. And
Mhm.
people were, that's when they had like the plague and all that stuff. And people were like, it was like, it's like it is now. See, we're in lack right now and we know it. But the only reason we're in lack is because we we're consumers and we don't have to be consumers, right?
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
let's go back to your roots, girl.
Yeah.
Okay. All
I
right,
like
that got really deep, really fast. You okay? You okay?
oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Did like a story, and it's before we started, right? But I was like, "Come and join us. Listen, it gets really deep."
Oh, shit.
I love
Well,
it.
well, because when you said roots, they showed me everything, and then before we started, you're like, "Is everything okay?" And I'm like, and
Yeah.
I knew what you were gonna experience, and I was like, "Oh, girl, go ahead. Go
No, I
ahead."
like it. What you were saying too, it resonates, like, even the so what you're saying too, when I think about roots, it's funny because I don't think about it so far into, like, barbaric space, but maybe I think about it so far in that space of, like, my own roots with, of course, like, my family in this
Right.
lifetime, right? But it's so interesting because it's like, "Oh, I'm here in this lifetime," and the furthest that it could go down to is probably, like, my 10x great-grandma, right? Like, but in another life, it's the same thing where it's like I'm a whole other human being and it goes back. But
Right.
even then, that's like it goes back to barbaric times. But
It
never thought
can,
about it
like,
that way.
however you wanna think of it, right?
Yeah,
Because it's energy,
yeah,
okay? It's
yeah.
energy.
Well, it's even what you were saying too, like I heard something recently where they were saying like when you heal in this present, and I've heard this before, like I've read A Course in Miracles, but they say like when you heal in the moment or when you're in this space in the present, it's like you're healing your past and then you're letting go of the future. I've read that so many times, and most recently it felt like, oh, I got it. Like when I'm healing right now and how the way that I'm talking to myself now or like my back or myself before, it's
Mhm.
like energetically the future part of me, which is now, is like sending a message to that 21-year-old that was like anxious. So it's like, oh,
Perfect.
when I was 21 and I was like meditating or like praying, it's like, oh shit, like was that me now sending the energy back? You know?
Yeah, because
Because
well,
it's all
okay,
energy.
so depending on how you practice, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, but I find that so trippy when it comes to just that part of, like, the energy and, like, going back and forth and
We're
roots
gonna
to
dip back into your
roots, so
experience now, okay, you ready? We're gonna
yeah,
dip back into your experience. I'm gonna ask you some questions,
yeah,
okay?
okay.
Alright. So I'm Caucasian,
Um,
alright? I'm
right?
Caucasian. We've all, like, figured that shit out, okay? Alright. Because, like, well, when I was growing up, right, you could
Uh-huh.
say, "Oh, no, I'm Spanish," and then you could fit in.
Yeah,
You could fit in, and there
yeah,
is none of that now. So there's no gliding through now. You are who you are, and you're gonna own it. Everybody's gonna own it. And as
okay.
they own it, it's gonna change things. We're gonna dip back into your 5th grade year. And how far into the year were you? Were you, like, just beginning the year, middle year, getting ready to go to summer?
I think it was, like, the middle of the year.
Wow. Did you talk to that cousin ever again?
We did, yeah, or I
Yeah,
did, yeah,
yeah.
but
Were
every
they
now uh-huh.
were they, like, supportive to you or not really?
No, not really. I don't To be honest, I don't think he really knew what was going on. I think it was just like, "Hey, my mom said this. Is it true?" And I don't think I went back and, like, told them anything.
Oh,
Like,
I
I
see.
think that part of, like, going back to school and talking to him feels like a blur.
Oh, yeah. That
Yeah,
would be like so there you are, you're in shock. That's shock.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Alright. And so from, how did that, like alright, let's go before that.
Um,
Alright? So, you talked about, having a religious background. Catholicism was something that you guys practiced, right? And
yeah,
was that traditional for the family?
it was. Yeah.
Okay. And so what else do you remember? Like, do you remember being taught how to cook, like
No, it
certain
was no.
remedies or anything like that?
So a lot of it was my mom saying, "You know what, like, school's first, just focus on school." So I
Okay.
didn't have, like, chores around the house, like, there's none of that growing up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Alright. My grandma yeah, my grandmother I would go to, like, a lot of different houses in the neighborhood, but my grandmother taught me a lot about cooking, but it was cooking that she learned here in the United States. So a lot of it was right, right, because over in Cuba and in Puerto Rico, they were considered well off and they were able to pay to have help. So she didn't have to do a lot of the cooking. She did a lot of the cooking, used to serve 7-course meals, but, and so, like, when she got over here so I learned a lot of German cooking from my
oh,
Spanish grandma.
that's so interesting because if anything, in some ways, like, it could add to that, "Oh, you're European,"
Oh, yeah, and so,
right?
like, here's perfect, right? So here's perfect, right? So it's kind of funny because, like, yeah, so it does cover that whole thing. Okay, so when you're growing up and your mom is telling you school first, is she pushing you out of the kitchen? I got pushed out of the kitchen, so
Oh,
I just
yeah.
wanna know. Oh,
Oh, yeah.
why? You're so curious, right? And you
Mhm.
know that whatever it is that they're doing, it's like this good
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. And even I remember, like, wanting to learn, or I remember even, like, the little things too, like helping clean the mess and stuff. But
Mhm.
that would also be like a, "No, you're gonna make a bigger mess. Just go do your homework."
Well, I used
Go
to like to try to do the dishes, and we had bubbles, let's just say. So, yeah, I wasn't allowed to do that anymore. So, yeah.
It's like, forget it, I
Okay.
have to clean 3 times.
And so do you think that mostly your foundation for, like, your beginning years was built in a religious format?
Yeah, I wanna say religious and, like, educational.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how do you feel that serves, like, what did you learn then during those times, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I
In
learned.
respect to how to apply this new knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Well, like, you're going through life, everything's really, it's just going smooth. You're going to church, you're learning about God, you're going to school, you're finding yourself, and you really don't know yourself. You're still absorbing. You're absorbing everything in that moment. You're like, oh, maybe that, maybe that, maybe that. Okay. So with did you have like family, a lot of family gatherings? So here's what I'm aiming for. Okay. So
Okay.
I've noticed that with Manuel's family, because it is a Hispanic family and it's a large family, and I didn't have a large family, but I had a lot of friends. So we always have big parties, right? But
Okay.
I noticed that they have the same kind of big parties, right?
Yeah.
And I just wonder, in there, there's like a lot of tradition. Like, you talk to somebody and now you're going to learn about like a lot of different things. So
Yeah.
is that the same for you? Like, when you were younger, did they have a lot of gatherings?
We did. It wasn't so much like traditional, like Mexican, like celebrating some of like the Mexican traditions, but I did have a lot of family gatherings. And a lot of the family also would stay with us for a little bit. Like they would come and stay here for a couple months or a couple years and they would leave.
Okay.
So there was always like family,
Okay.
which is
And
so
what do
funny.
you remember learning from them?
They were always like, so one of my aunts, like she taught me how to do math. She taught me how to do like braids, right? Like she taught me how to like crack my fingers. It's like the little things.
The important things.
Yeah, like
Well,
yeah,
what did braiding? So braiding is very good, right? Braiding's like, it's very therapeutic.
it
All
is.
right. And
I
I just want to know, like, what did she tell you while she was braiding your hair?
that pain hurts. That beauty hurts.
You'll always remember that moment, right?
You're like, "Wow, it's like beauty hurts."
That's perfect. And that was acceptable. That's what I'm talking about. Just
Yeah, it was.
barely.
Yeah, it was.
You were told to just sit still.
Shut up.
That's
No.
right.
Then it's
Okay. Those roots seem real similar, huh?
like yeah. It's like those little things, right? Where it's like they do make a huge difference when you're an adult.
Yeah, they do. They
It's like,
do.
"Oh,
It's
yeah,
like,
like,
"Oh,
my
you're
work
not sure how
okay."
you want your hair pulled anymore."
Yeah.
It's it's got all this to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it does, yeah. But yeah, I do
So
remember
then
that too. So it was I, so it was like the upbringing of being Catholic, like the family gatherings, the school being first all the time. And of course, like as I got older, like it's changed, right? Where it's like I challenged Catholicism and I'm like, okay, hold on, I don't want to be Catholic anymore. And that was a journey within itself. And even now with school, like I'm still challenging it. And
right?
yeah.
What so let's look at the conversations that we had as kids, right?
Yeah.
Those suck. Those
They
suck. Because we know that's what shapes us and how we view, that's the lens we look through. That's the kaleidoscope we're given, right? And
yeah.
depending on how tainted in paradigm we are, right?
Tainted paradigm.
Okay, right? Well, because tinted lens, however you want to look at it. Because we're still where we're at right now, where we're
Uh-huh.
in this level of unacceptance for what's going on and what we would like to see change. We are only at the very beginning of the dynamic, and it's going to get extremely
More.
volatile
Okay.
until until it doesn't. You
Okay.
can see that tempers are flaring. You can see that people are holding on to their beliefs to such a degree that they're willing to kill for it. But that's always been. Keep that in mind. It's
Yeah.
always been that way. In the Bible, it tells you that.
Yeah.
The Bible can be a book of war if you want to look at it. There's constant war, spiritual war, physical war. Okay.
It's
There's
like
just like all
war.
kinds.
It's like war. I think last time in the video that you mentioned how war is always going to happen. And right now, like as you're talking about war, it makes me think like, oh, is like war always going to happen because we're in our ego, like because we're human?
I don't think so. I think it's because we experience contrast.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that that's because of the energy. And I think that so it, our version of a perfect world isn't here yet because we're not satisfied with the world we live in.
Oh, lack.
That's it.
We're
It's
s
that's it. That's what causes everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Everything. That's the
We're like
crazy,
lack, we're in, like,
crazy
separation.
stuff. Well, either you don't have enough belief, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And belief in what? Yourself, your experience, what you've been taught. Yeah, all of the above, right?
Yeah, I would say it's, like because even, like, the lack, right? Like, the lack or the separation comes from being disconnected from yourself.
I
That's
think so.
that's, like, the main core. Because I also
Right.
feel like the moment that you connect to yourself, like, just automatically, you also connect to the higher source.
Yeah.
And it's like, "Oh, we're also disconnected from that." I
Yeah.
was talking to one of a friend, like, from work the other day, and I was telling her about prayer
Mhm.
and miracles and stuff like that, and it's like, "Oh, I think at some point, maybe we all do believe in a higher source, and we pray and miracles happen, but at some point when they come true, it's like we grasp onto it, and all of a sudden we turn into lack and into, like, give us some more, and when it doesn't happen, we start to, like, disconnect more and more of it." Wow.
Right. And now let's take all that and look at your childhood. Okay?
Mm.
All right. So lack started when you heard that, right? Lack
Yeah,
started when you heard that because all of a sudden it shifted and it gave you duality. You learned duality in that amount of time. Okay?
yeah,
Duality is all about relationship. So now you're self-checking who you are in context to anything. All
yeah.
right. And we'll just let that year go. Maybe the years after they were, like, how did the talk go? Were you satisfied with the talk or was it still blurry?
Not
Yeah.
no, there was, they told me the truth, right? Like, I wasn't theirs, and there was a lot of curiosity and a lot of pain, but the way that my parents turned it into was like, "Just be grateful. You have a roof over your head. Be grateful you have a mom and dad. Be grateful because we give you everything you want." Like, so there was never talk about, like and even as an adult, like, it's crazy, like, a couple months ago, I had a boxing match with Daryl, and a lot of the stuff was coming up, and I was like, "I'm so mad, and I'm this," and I started crying, and my mom came home, my mom who adopted me, and she was like, "Why are you crying?" Right? Again, like, fucking nothing changes, right? And I
Yeah.
was like, "Nothing," and she was like, "Why are you crying? Did Daryl do something to you?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness." So I'm like, "Okay, maybe this is my chance to be open to, like, my adopted mom," right? I was like, "Oh, I was crying because, like, I'm feeling grief over my birth mom." You know what her response was? She was like, "Fuck you." She was like, "Fuck you," and I was like, "Are you serious?" And Daryl stepped in, right? Like, "Hey, you know what? Like, that's not nice to say, like, she's crying, whatever," and I was like, "No wonder." I was like, I could only imagine when I was a kid, like, this is the same energy, you know? And just recently, like, she actually apologized, which I thought was sweet, but it's still like that moment in time, like, I'm trying to learn how to be vulnerable and express myself, and I get received with, like, a "fuck you." So it kinda feels like that as a
Hard
kid,
one.
where it's like, "Oh, I'm curious, I'm mad, I'm, like, sad," and it's like, "Be grateful."
Yeah. That's
So,
a rub some dirt on it comment if I ever heard one.
yeah, rub some dirt on it? What do you mean?
So when the boys would fall or anybody would skin their knee, I go rub some dirt on it, it'll be all right.
Oh, yeah, just totally dismissing it. Yeah, totally
Right.
dismissing
Do you want to know why? You want to know why? We were trained that way. We were
to
trained that way to not notice and just absorb. That's what women were taught for a very long time. To to just notice and absorb. You'll have your opening. You'll have your opening. Do everything you need to. You'll have your opening. That's what women were taught. Just like that. Shut the
Serial
fuck up. Shut the fuck up. This is like how you live. This is what happens. You're always going to have this in your workplace. You're always going to have this when you go to the store. You're always going to, and we were taught to absorb it.
Yeah,
So, suck it up was the name of the game for women, for sure. I know that men have a different version of suck it up. Like they were given, you have to be the breadwinner, you have to
Mhm.
make sure that you have XYZ. So that whole paradigm that we were given, we're unwinding, of course, because it is
Yeah.
so phallus.
Yeah, ballast. I like
Right? It's such a fuck you.
and that's
I'm
what
very good at English. You know what's funny? It's almost my second language. My grandmother. Okay, so my grandma was
uh-huh.
Irish and Spanish. And so when she would yell at me in Spanish and she'd be angry with me, her Irish brogue would come up in Spanish. And I would just look at her and I'd be so confused. I'd be so confused because I'd be like, I don't know what language. I
Is
don't
it
know
all these
which
things you
language you're talking about. I love you.
Is that what is she saying? That she loves me? Okay, I love you too, Grandma.
I know that's not what she was saying because I was a hell kid. I was a hell kid. But so, okay, so now you were talking about how your mom raised you and told you that school was important and you needed to go to and have religion, right? That's the paradigm she was given. So she's passing that on to you because she feels she's found her happiness. She's in her bliss. She's fine.
Yeah,
She's fine. So whatever it is that you want, okay, fine. But like this is like the way it works.
this
That's
is
how she
priority.
feels. Yes. So until she goes through her identity crisis, because every woman does, every man does, you go through an identity crisis.
Um,
And it usually happens in the transition from your hormones that are like super like, I'm gonna make this work, I'm gonna make this work, I'm gonna make this work, right?
uh,
To what the fuck happened? And then you get reflective and you want to apologize to the world and nobody's listening. Nobody's listening. Nobody wants to have anything to do with what you're fucking saying because they've already worked through their shit. Now it's your turn.
over it by then.
That's right. That's right. And that's it right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's okay. That's okay. It makes it so cool, right?
Yeah, it
Okay.
does.
Yeah. Okay, so what I've noticed, here's what I noticed just from what you told me and you showed me like the pattern because we're looking at patterns, right?
Okay.
So for the pattern, you're yay! People from Argentina. Mwah!
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Welcome. That's so awesome.
Yay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So what yeah, right. So what we've learned so far is this, okay? Is that you were heavy for education and heavy for religion. And in that, that's going to shape like how you think and how you participate. That I was the same, only my religion came about because I was called a bastard by the Catholic Church. So then my dad said, we'll be Protestant. And that all happened with like my dad, my mom, and all kinds of stuff. Okay. But I was raised knowing all that. So when you tell a child
Yeah.
paradigms like that, they're gonna like have like these questions and curiosities, maybe be confused and overwhelmed, But I was just told straight a lot of things, just straight. Well, this is how it is, and I was like, oh my gosh. So,
Oh,
so we went to a Free Methodist church, and I
okay.
went there for a long time, and that's where I got that Jesus concept on me. Where I thought I was going to be the next Jesus. Because, like, when you go to church, right, they tell you, oh, you're going to be a nice little disciple. You're going to go and be an apostle. And you're going to go share all that word with everyone.
You, Jesus.
And you're like 7 or 8 years old. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I remember like, okay, I'll do it.
And it usually happens like some weird part, right? You're just trying to like absorb everything. That's all you're trying to do. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, it's so crazy. Like when I was a kid, I actually love to go to church.
Me too.
Me, like now that I'm older, it's like, oh, I think I've always had a sense of like spirituality in me, of like a higher power or
Right.
feeling that warmth. But I
Okay.
think as a kid growing up, there was just like stuff added to it. Oh yeah, that warmth, it's because you're inside the church. Oh yeah, like that miracle that's happening. Oh, it's because you're actually going to church every Sunday. It's like
Okay.
there's always like
You
some
start to associate it. You
yeah.
start to associate it. Right.
I remember when I left the religion 'Cause my biggest fear was they taught me that if I leave Catholicism, I might go to hell. Like, if I
Yes.
don't, like, say Lord is my savior or I'm gonna go
Right.
to hell. So there was a period where I was like, "Fuck it, I guess I'll go to hell." Like, I just don't wanna
Right?
do it anymore. And that shit was so scary. Like, let me go.
I'm gonna be my own person.
Yeah, yes! Isn't that crazy? Oh my god.
No, no, that's the layering of propaganda that you get inside of a dogma.
Oh my goodness,
That's
yeah,
the layering of propaganda that you get inside of a dogma. It doesn't make religion bad. It
yeah,
means that this is how they can practice in the masses to connect to the God of their understanding. They create criteria so that everybody can stay in that flow of energy. They need a construct so that
yeah,
that way that many people can connect in the way that they provide. It really will. It really will work. It's a good religion. All religions are good. They connect
yeah,
you to God.
yeah, they
There's
have the
just like
vibes.
there's just like right, there's just like these different things that like separate you, and it's usually how you start to formulate your beliefs in your environment. And when something from the paradigm that you're learning from, the dogma, the foundation, if it has a hole in it, it'll start to make
Mm,
you say there has to be more. There has to be more to this. And it's usually us. We're looking for us. Like where are we? We practice this, but who am I? Who am
yeah,
I and what do I need? So for me, I still like I haven't been to church in a while, but I still go. I go once in a while. I
okay,
go because there's this energy, all right? And I go to any church I want. That's the best part.
yeah,
I'm going to connect with the God of my understanding. I have a full, complete understanding that that's what happens for me. You can
yeah,
have everybody in the same religion walking into the the they're like temple cathedral. I'm like, okay, yeah, any of those.
um,
You could have like maybe 50 people going in there. Okay, that's low budget, but 50 people going in there, all
yeah,
for the same religious practices, and they're still going to have their own concept and connection to the God of their understanding. That's your spirituality. That's your connection to being able to practice spiritual principles because you're pulling from that because you're determining what that looks like.
okay,
So I used to like when I was I don't know if I want to say this. I think I will anyway. Okay, because we know that we got to be fucking honest. Okay. So 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 I used to like okay, so I've been open for a really long time, right?
mhm,
And when I was going to church, I still saw that there was like that duality, that there were people that were maybe not like all into religion and they had like their things. And then I think that when I was 13, I went into a metaphysical shop. I was 12 or 13,
okay,
and I went into a metaphysical shop that my sister found who was 10 years old. So I was 13, 12 or 13. So we were there.
uh-huh,
It was over in Orange and we lived in Anaheim. That tells you how we were raised.
because you guys were just out. Nobody was watching over
10
you guys.
years old in Orange
Yeah,
from
you guys
Anaheim.
nobody was being
That's like,
watched, yeah,
that's crazy.
yeah,
We
yeah,
had a lot of freedom, like way too much freedom, but we
yeah,
were told truths, so we went and lived those truths.
yeah,
So so anyway, that's when I was introduced to runes, and I knew that like there was like more to life, and I could hear God perfectly fine. God had been with me for like my whole life. That
yeah,
that was just like my understanding because that's who got me through what I was going through.
so you knew.
It wasn't, yeah, and it wasn't a secondary friend. It's like this really divine connection that I have, and I've really developed it because that was all I had. I didn't have shit. Like I didn't have any kind of structure outside of me that was really working. It had its own structure, and I thought that was normal. I would go and try to compare it to other things, and that was not normal. And I was like, okay, whatever. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
so all of those things are going to shape you. So for me, my dad drank a lot, and my grandma snuck his liquor. I used to help her pour water. Like I would do it because I was really good. I'm really good at color.
okay.
So I would pour I would pour water and mix the color so the wild turkey looked the right color so that when my dad came home and had a drink, because
Like,
she
you
was
were just
shots. So I had to make it right for however many shots she had that day. Okay. So I
Okay.
would do that.
Were you still 10 or
This, I'm a mixologist. So I'm doing these things. See, I have talents. When I went and applied for my bar job, I knew what I was doing. Okay.
how old were you when you were doing this?
Probably 8, about 8. It was after her husband died.
Okay.
She was my mom's mom, and she came to live with us when my mom passed. And so it was like he was there for about he died when I was 7, but he was there for like when I was 6, and I used to help him. I used to help him and my grandmother uh ambulate him throughout the house, and I would talk to him in the front yard when he was in his wheelchair, stuff
Okay.
like that. He was my white grandpa.
Yeah.
He was my white grandpa. So he was very interesting. He was
Okay.
very interesting. He would be the epitome. He was born in the 1800s.
Wow. Oh my
Blow
goodness.
your fucking mind right there. 1889.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
And he was my grandpa.
Wow.
All my parents, I'm late in life baby. So yeah. So
Okay.
we span a very large aspect.
Did
Yeah.
you ever I mean, you were younger, but did he ever tell you stories about when he was
All
younger?
the time. All the time. Yeah, all the time. He was very he was very active with like Teddy Roosevelt and all of the building of the parks and stuff in the United States. So he would take my grandma, and they would go on trail rides and things like that. And he
Mm.
really liked to take her to exciting places like Niagara Falls and stuff like that. And it was
Cool.
really big in the right. It was really big in the. I think that they got together. Gosh, probably in the. Did they go through the World War together? I don't think so. So maybe, yeah, I
Oh,
think they did. I think they went through World War II
wow.
together, or they knew each other. I know they were both alive, but I think right around then. I know
Wow.
that my mom, I'm trying to think about how old my mom was. I think she was a teenager when my grandma married him. And I don't know if my grandma married him because I don't know if she ever really got a divorce. So she just took his name, right? So that
Okay.
it would look good, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's just how it was done.
Yeah, it
So
is. Yeah, talking about, like, like, the old beliefs and all.
that's just my Caucasian family taking advantage of the fucking system,
Okay.
right? Because we could. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's be honest. Let's
Yeah.
be honest, because everybody else would feel compelled to do the right thing, right?
What were they
Whatever
teaching?
the right thing was.
Yeah, well, I'm curious too, like, what is it
She wasn't able, she had to run away from him because he used to chloroform her so that he could rape the maids. So she had to get away from him. They like I have such a family background. That's why when you said roots, I was like, oh, like a deer in the headlights. I'm like, how much you talking about?
You're like,
Like, what is it you really want to know, girl? Like, I'll tell you.
I'm
Like,
over
I'm
here
trying
like
not
I'm
to
over
be as
here like
Caucasian as I am, but you know
I
what? This is widespread. This is in every culture and every dynamic. And what we're doing is we're creating a way to have a conversation
yeah,
around some really hard topics,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Well,
all
isn't
of us
that
are doing
crazy?
those healings. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's what we're doing because it's like everybody has a story. It's like not my mom would always say this too. It's like no family is ever perfect. So it's like everybody
Which
has like
mom? Which mom?
the one that said fuck you, which is crazy, huh?
Okay, so no, this is awesome. But do you see? You have this natural love for her,
I do. I really do.
right? And
Yeah.
then what happens is that somebody will say stupid shit. Doesn't matter who it is. They'll say
Yeah.
stupid shit. It will go ahead and it will trigger you. It'll trigger you into whatever you're going through. It's not them, right? But you're also triggered in that moment of that experience. So now you're in a double trigger,
Yeah.
and
Would you
you're not processing. Nobody's processing there. Everybody's getting mad and walking away or saying other things. So
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, believe me. Yeah. Oh my god, yeah.
right.
A lot of that going on where it's like I think there was like shock and then like it went back to like being a kid again and then it was like no wonder I can't speak up. Like fuck you in my head, you know, emotionally.
Right.
This is and then it's back to like, "Okay, I love you, like, I see you're doing your best
Right.
man."
Right.
You
Right.
know? I
Now
see her
that's
women's
like, what
security,
the
I see
fuck
her
is that?
educating.
Right?
Yeah.
What the
Yeah.
fuck is that? Why do we
Uh,
keep doing that? Because we get told these things like family matters.
yeah. Yeah,
That's
it was
all you
just
got. That's how I grew up. That's all you got.
his family.
You don't
Yeah.
have anybody. You don't have anybody but your sisters. That's it.
Yeah, my mom does the same thing. You know, she'll be like, "Oh, we're all you have." Like, at the end of the day, she was like, "Boyfriends will come and go, friends will come and go, but your parents are always gonna stay the same."
Right.
You know? But again, it's like there's so many stories
Mine
where
are dead. So what happened?
what what happened?
Mine are dead. So what happened? They didn't stay the same. They're not around now.
It's like you guys broke a promise.
That's right. Broken promises.
Yeah. It's like
I think that what kind of like bothered me, I think that what bothered me was that I tried my best to fit into any circumstance that I could as I was growing up because I didn't know who I was and I had so many different environmental offerings that were being given to me that was very overwhelming. So it forced me to create many constructs to feel safe,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And like a lot of it ended me up like where I ended up, doing some silly stuff. When we were talking, oh yeah, that's what I was saying. I didn't know how to go there. I just like kicked that one in. Good trigger. Okay. So when I was out on the street and I was running amok,
Uh-huh.
I still had spiritual I had deep spiritual aspects because I was curious. I'm a seeker. I'm naturally a seeker. I didn't understand that until I found metaphysics and oh God,
Mhm.
everything makes so much sense now.
Mhm.
So I was I would say maybe 3 weeks before, like 3 weeks before I got clean. Okay. So three
Mhm.
weeks before I got clean, I went into the Catholic church where they christen you. Okay. So I got christened there and I could remember like all of the dynamic of it. And
Mhm.
so I went in there to light a red candle, like a candle, because I was asking for help from God. And I knew that God would listen to me. I've never worried about going into a church and praying to God. I know that when I go in there, there's a certain atmosphere and I have a certain reverence. So in that certain reverence, I'm able to make that connection. I didn't know that I could make that connection outside of that. That was the thing that I didn't understand. But at that time, I went in, I prayed for myself, I lit a candle, and I left. So
Mhm.
I went to St. Boniface, and that's where I was christened. And it was really interesting because 3 weeks later, I get clean, and probably 6 months after that, I stopped back in there again. And now I'm feeling like I understand, like I'm making this connection. It takes like fucking 20 years to get,
Oh,
right? To
yeah.
get to understand that it's okay to be me.
Yeah, but again, it goes back to, like, the conditioning, right? Like, it goes back to what we're
Oh, yeah.
trained or taught at a very young age,
Yeah. I
you
think a
know,
lot
or
of it,
how, like, we're kinda like what you were saying, how you didn't have like that, like, nobody was watching over you guys. It's like it takes, like, emotionally available adults to be there for us and to be able to cope with us or help us through, like, our shit when we're kids.
oh yeah, and they were both going through like the dynamic of the death of like their wife and daughter. And
Mhm.
so like, that's like a lot. And then they're trying to care for two girls who lost their mom and they're just like, they're really trying and they're showing up to the best of their ability. I understand that. And I understood that then. So it wasn't like I was like worried. It actually worked out.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're here now.
Yeah. Yay!
Fucking human being and soul.
That's right. That's right. So how do you think your beliefs or like the structure that you were given, how do you think it is like represented in your life now?
Now, I think that, like, the seed of spirituality is always there, right? It's always been there, and it's still something that I not strive for, but just be more in the moment, right? Are you asking me kinda like how is that structure in my life now?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah, so I think spirituality is there, it's present, and if anything, I'm always curious to learn more outside of the structure that I was taught in, or if anything, I've been curious as to like, "Oh, well, what is it that they're learning?" but not in the way where it's clinging or it's judgmental or it's that, like, fearful base, more of like, okay, like, obviously there's some truth in the Bible, like, what is that? Some key
Yeah,
message.
well, you're gonna find truth everywhere
Yeah,
because it's an opinion and a perception that somebody had an experience.
yeah, it's like it's somebody else's
Okay?
conviction.
Yes, and that's what our life is somebody else's shit
Yeah.
until you find, like, what you want.
Yeah, your own conviction. So
Right.
that's always there, right? Like I still feel very called to serve like, the universe. For me, it's like the universe now. It's not God. So I still
Okay.
feel very present in that. Still like the gratitude still is like okay, so even with my family and like them pushing on gratitude, there is a lot of blessing and gratitude with that itself.
Oh, yeah.
Because if anything, like them telling me like, "Hey, be grateful," it actually made me turn inward to God. Like, "Okay, God, like I see the differences of what my life could have been and what my life is, and I'm so grateful. Like, thank you for giving me a second chance." And as an adult, it's like my half brothers and sisters, like they'll tell me, or my birth mom will tell me, like, your life would have been so fucking different. So it adds to like, thank you, God. Like, I don't know why I'm the one that, is out here doing this, but thank you so much. So it's if anything, it has strengthened my relationship with God.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, in that way. Or in so many
Yeah.
other ways, right? Not just that, but with
Yeah,
the
but I agree. I agree. How about if we talk about different structures the
uh
next something like that, like how we learn, right?
yeah,
Because like there's a lot of stereotypes out there. We should talk about stereotypes, okay?
okay.
And so because there's some religious like because like people don't understand that in the United States we're a melting pot. That's what we
Yeah,
are. We're actually a melting pot. We didn't begin that way. These were native lands. I totally recognize that and I really respect that.
yeah.
After the bullshit that happened, the colonization, we're a
Uh-huh.
melting pot. It would be nicer to be in a better situation of that, right? I would like that. That's what we're
Yeah,
working
let's do
through
that.
conversation. I understand. I think that maybe if we looked at like the different like religious or spiritual practices that like we gravitated toward, and maybe we discussed that, and then what we found, we could find
Mhm.
that connection between the different peoples that we came across. Would you like that?
Yeah, I'd be open to
Okay,
that.
so
Yeah.
maybe we could do that next time. You like that?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
let's yeah.
You remind me. It's gonna be a week, okay?
Okay, yeah. I'll send you a text message.
Thank you.
Let's talk about it. Let's yeah,
I love you. I love you. Thank you.
I love you
Okay.
too.
And then
Yeah.
back to you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in today.
Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to comment and share our videos.
Yeah, share our videos if you'd like. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Peace.